Okay, so we're going to go through some basic irrigation components. And I do this because my experience tells me that most people just aren't familiar with a lot of this stuff. And it might seem very basic and mundane, but I want to go over it with you. We'll look at meters, pipes, valves, sprinklers, and primarily focus on low volume drip irrigation because, again, it looks like most of you are interested in that. We will take some time to look at some controllers also. Unfortunately, I don't have the time or the number of controllers to set up for everybody to try to program one, but we'll go through some basic steps, and I'll tell you where you can find some good tips. Okay, so you need to consider a few things when you're thinking about efficiency with irrigation. So the controller is very important. You need to have controllers that have specific capabilities. Most of the newer controllers do, but it also kind of depends on where you're shopping. I always recommend Ewing Irrigation or Scotts Valley Sprinkler. There's a location in Scotts Valley and a location in Watsonville. Now the reason I recommend these two locations is because honestly that's where the professionals shop. They specialize in irrigation equipment. They have the highest quality products. They have employees there who are familiar with the products, have experience in the field, and can help you with questions that you might have. I know that there's irrigation products sold at some of the big box stores, but it's not the highest quality products, and they can barely tell you what aisle it's on, much less anything about the product. So I'd recommend Ewing Irrigation or Scotts Valley Sprinkler. Yes, good question.
Scotts Valley.
Okay, yeah. There's one in Watsonville and one in Scotts Valley, so don't let the name fool you. So yeah, you want to make sure you have the proper components, your hardware. You want to have a well-designed irrigation system. You can have the best intentions and a poorly designed irrigation system, and you're likely going to be wasting a lot of water. And a consistent maintenance routine, meaning whether it's once every 2 weeks, once a month, after every time you mow, you're turning on the controller, activating those valves if you have an automatic system on a regular basis to look for breaks and leaks, because things happen all the time and you may not know because you may be programmed to come on at 5 in the morning and you're not up at 5 in the morning looking around for breaks and leaks. So have a regular routine where you're activating those valves and looking, troubleshooting for any problems. Okay, this is a really nice diagram here of what's going on underneath the soil. It's always very mysterious to folks. What's going on underneath the soil? I don't know where all these pipes or where all these wires are going. You can find this online. Hunter Irrigation has a little booklet. I believe it's called Sprinkler Design in the Landscape. And this is the centerpiece, the fold out in that booklet. So you start with the meter. Hopefully there's an isolation valve after the meter so that you can turn your water off. You don't want to turn the valve before the meter because that belongs to the water purveyor. And if you break it, you bought it. They're going to charge you for it. They don't want you touching that valve. So it's very smart to have an isolation valve, actually I think it's right here, a gate valve or a ball valve, right after the meter that's yours that you can shut off at any time in case you need to make repairs or to add new components to your system. If you have an automatic system, you usually go to some kind of solenoid valve that's automatically activated by the controller, and then that will go out to your different stations or your different zones. Okay, we'll get into some more details here about some of this stuff. So here's your meter. How many of you know where your meter is located? Okay, a good number of you do. This is one of the first exercises I do in my class. The assignment is go home, find your water meter. Right away, I've lost half the class. They can't find their water meter. So I tell them, well, look here, here, and here. Usually in a typical residential area, it's out front, it's in the sidewalk. It's fairly easy to find. You probably walked by it a million times and never noticed it. They'll either read in gallons or cubic feet, or sometimes in 100 cubic feet. So it'll be important to know what exactly you're looking at, what the readings are given to you in. And, well, why do you want to read your water meter? What's the big deal? Well, you can measure your water use. You can go to the water meter, write down the reading, turn on your irrigation system, okay, do your normal cycle, shut it down, go back to the meter and see exactly how much water you used. You'll know how much water you're using in the landscape. So you can measure it. Then if you can measure it, well, you can manage it. You can determine how much water your landscape actually needs. You can manage your water use efficiently. And it's also helpful to check for leaks. So most of your controllers are going to have a little red dial or a triangle. You see here, that's a leak detector. It detects very low volumes of water moving through the meter. If you have a leak, it might be a slow leak, but if you go here and you see that triangle is moving around a little bit, or this red dial is moving, it might be moving slowly. It might be moving so slowly that you just can't tell. It's almost imperceptible. So what you can do is look at it, go away for a couple of minutes, make sure no one's running any water inside or outside the house, and go back. And if that dial's moved, there's water flowing somewhere. So at least you know, okay, now we have a leak. Now we need to troubleshoot further. So knowing where your flow meter is and how to read it can be very important. Okay, so there's a typical situation. It's usually in the sidewalk. You want to remove the lid. Watch out for any critters. Black widows like to hang out in there. Snails, slugs, frogs, all sorts of stuff. Just wear some gloves to protect yourself. And here's what I was referring to earlier. So we know the water is flowing towards me in this picture because there's a gate valve that the property owner has installed, and there is the valve that belongs to the water purveyor that you don't want to touch. It's actually very difficult to turn it by hand. There's a special device, a key that can be used that makes it much easier to turn, but I don't recommend it. Okay, I think I told you about this, or maybe I didn't necessarily. If you have a leak and it's on your side, you're likely going to have to bear the costs of that. It will probably show up on your water bill, especially if it's a big leak. Sometimes the water agency will forgive it, maybe once, maybe twice. But generally, you're going to be responsible for that cost. If there's a leak and it's on the water purveyor side, well, thank goodness, they're not going to charge you for that. They'll take care of it. That's their responsibility. Okay, let's talk about some pipe now. I have some different pipe up here. This might look familiar to some of you. This is PVC. Okay, this white PVC here is designed to be buried underground. This is not meant to be above ground. It might look opaque, but it's not. It's translucent, and when it's above ground, light will penetrate, and you could start to have algae buildup, especially if you're injecting fertilizers through your irrigation system, and that can lead to clogging of your emitters. Also, this can become very brittle over time. If you're going to have some, or you need some pipe above ground, I'd recommend, and it's going to be PVC, I'd recommend Schedule 80. This has UV inhibitors. It's also a thicker wall. You can maybe look and see the difference, so it's stronger. If it's accidentally kicked, it's less likely to break or crack than the thinner wall white PVC. And they come in a variety of classes. I'm not going to take the time to go through it. Generally, you'll find Schedule 40 or Class 200 as your two main types of white PVC. And this is Schedule 80 that's gray. Don't confuse this with conduit, electrical conduit. Electrical conduit is not rated for pressurized systems. So you shouldn't be running irrigation water through electrical conduit. Generally, it's a lighter gray color than this, but you'll just want to confirm. Usually it'll be stamped on here that it's Schedule 80. Okay, so that's our PVC lesson. They're generally used for main lines and for higher pressure systems. Some of you may also be familiar with polyethylene tubing, or PE tubing. It's flexible, right? So this is often used for low volume, low pressure systems, drip irrigation systems, micro irrigation systems. There are types of polyethylene tubing that have a thicker wall and can withstand higher pressures and can be used for lateral lines, even in sprinkler systems, and it's being more commonly used. But you, as the homeowner, are not going to be using that because it takes a higher level of expertise, and there's actually some special equipment that welds the pipe together. You're going to be using the polyethylene tubing that's rated for lower pressure and is easily available. Okay, usually comes in rolls of 500 or 1,000 feet. Maybe you can get a roll of 100 as well. And it's flexible, so it gives you the ability to move it around and go around curves and do more than you can with this rigid PVC pipe, which again you don't want on the soil surface. This polyethylene tubing is often used on the soil surface. What I recommend is installing it on the soil surface and then covering it with a 3 to 6 inch layer of mulch. Okay, so it's not visible because it's not aesthetically pleasing. It's under that mulch. It's also not a trip hazard under the mulch, but it's easily accessible if you need to get to it to make any repairs or changes. Some of you may be familiar with this brown tubing. Now this is called inline tubing. There are emitters. Oh, did I grab a piece with no emitter? That's fine. Yeah, I got two. How about that? Pretend they're emitters. Oh, here's one. Okay, this was actually black. So this is manufactured with the emitters pre-installed. Okay, you don't have to place those button emitters in here. That can be very handy, particularly for dense plantings. This is even being used now for subsurface irrigation of lawns or ground covers. Okay, so this can be very handy, particularly if you don't want to be placing those emitters. You can save your thumb. And also another advantage is you won't lose emitters. Oftentimes emitters are accidentally kicked or they blow off or they break. This can help prevent that. So here you go. Here's a good picture of what I was referring to earlier, and we can pass this one around too. So you can see that little circle is just the orifice that allows the water to leave the line. There's an emitter inside of there. And those emitters can come with different spacings. Usually it's 12 inches or 18 inches or 24 inches, maybe even 36 inches along the line. Some of them are what's called pressure compensating, which can be helpful if you're irrigating on a slope. So they will, the emitter will apply approximately the same amount of water over a given pressure range. And you see how it can be designed here to sort of snake through the garden, right? And you're sort of wetting the most of the soil profile there. So it's good, again, for dense plantings. If you have a more sparse planting, then I'd probably recommend using the polyethylene tubing without the emitters pre-installed, and then you install your own emitters specifically where you need them. With a drip irrigation system, you definitely need a pressure regulating valve. Okay, that will reduce the pressure to a level that's more appropriate for the system. If you don't, you're going to blow emitters out. You're going to apply a lot more water than you think you're applying, and there just increases opportunities to damage or break components within the irrigation system. You also need a filter. You may have noticed that orifice is pretty small. Well, it doesn't take much to clog up those emitters, so a good filter will help prevent that. And as you can see here, it's a pretty simple device. Just has a little screen filter in here. So as part of your regular maintenance, you want to take this apart occasionally, maybe once or twice a year, clean off any debris that's in here, and then just pop it right back in there. You're good to go. Make sure you don't lose your O-ring. For a more occasional, quicker type of maintenance, you can just screw off the cap, or sometimes there'll even be a little ball valve here that you can turn on and flush it out. Flush that debris out of here. Run it for 20 or 30 seconds. Pass a couple of these around. So for a quick, easy drip irrigation system, you can come right off an existing hose bib. That's one way to do it. And it can even be automated. There are battery operated or even solar powered controllers now that can be adapted to this hose bib type of system. A lot of people like this because it's easy. There's not a lot of digging. They're not having to install wires to a controller. It's a lot less intimidating. And it's easily doable. One thing you want to make sure you have is a vacuum breaker adapter. You want to have that on anything that's attached to a hose bib. Even if it's just your garden hose, that helps prevent backflow into the potable water supply. So for instance, if I have my garden hose, open-ended, no nozzle on it, I drop it in a bucket, say I was washing my car with some soapy water. If for whatever reason a vacuum occurs and it could actually suck that dirty soapy water up into the potable water supply, it can get back into my house, and I could, maybe my daughter goes to get a drink of water, she gets some dirty water. It can happen. So this vacuum breaker allows air into the line, it breaks the vacuum, and what you will commonly see, particularly when you're rolling up the hose, is some water will squirt out. And that's exactly what it's designed to do, so that's not a problem.
Are you saying you put it on every hose?
I put it on every hose bib.
Oh.
Yeah, no matter what I'm attached to, whether it's a garden hose or if it's something like this, a drip system. Vacuums can happen, and particularly with a drip irrigation system, when it shuts down, water and soil can actually be sucked back into those emitters, and again, it can be drawn back into the potable water supply. So this is a really easy and inexpensive way to prevent that.
It's called hose swivel.
It's a vacuum breaker.
Oh, vacuum.
They'll either be plastic or brass, generally. And it just attaches right to the hose bib, and then you can attach your hose. It barely knows. Yes, sir?
Yeah, you can get bibs that have them built into it too.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some hose bib assemblies that even come with them. That's great. So then what you're looking at here after that is the filter and the pressure regulator, which you already talked about. So pretty simple, easy to do.